Jonathan,
Yeah,
is that you?
it is.
Am I dreaming?
You might be.
I might be dreaming of code. If anybody could help me decipher it, maybe. Oh, hi, Elliot.
I wonder.
Hey,
We're here. We're video. This is new for us. Very exciting.
Yeah.
And it's all because of
That's
Elliot. Thank you. Elliot, how about you tell our listeners who you are if they don't know already?
sure. My name's Elliot. I run the Dreams of Code YouTube channel on YouTube, which creates video content about software development. I actually run two channels. I also run another one, which is a little bit more focused on Linux, self-hosting, and open source, but Dreams of Code is my biggest one.
And for a good reason. If listeners of Cup haven't, subscribed yet or watched Elliot's stuff yet, the reason we're talking is I just watched your stuff and I was like, hey, you released a Go video about doing a little spinner on the terminal. And I was like, I do a Go thing. Maybe we can talk. But if you're into super fancy keyboards, sort of relaxing British guy, ASMR sounding kind of thing, and really cool projects and things like that, we're gonna start by putting the plug at the beginning. Stop the show right now, go subscribe to Elliot's channel and come back. But welcome to the show, man.
Smash the like button.
And subscribe and press the bell to get the notification. Like I'm making fun of it, but this, like, we do want people to subscribe to the show, and we do want people to do all these good metrics. So what sort of, I'm going to start with my first sort of question. Why Go in the content making space versus more popular languages? I mean, Go is popular, but it's not the most popular.
That's very true. For me, it's kind of a language of love. That sounds very cheesy, but it's a language that I absolutely love to use. Go for me is, I come from like a C++ background. So using Go feels very close to using something like C. Obviously, Rob Pike and the creators of Go have done an exceptional job to model the standard library like glibc, but they've also taken a lot of consideration into the language as well, for both good and bad. There's some things that are missing, I think, from the language, especially with modern language design. But most of the goals of Go have been to combat the complexity with languages such as C++ and Java as well, and all these other modern languages. So for me, I think if you've watched my content, I do very minimal video editing. Well, my video editing can sometimes be very polished, but a lot of my style is very minimal. It's something I really like. I work in a terminal with most of my coding anyway, so most of the way I work is very minimal. I try to not fall into the trap of complexity, which is very difficult to do in software development, and I feel like Go is an extension of that simplicity or minimalism.
John, you obviously do, I think, market yourself as a strictly Go guy as well, right? Like you have a thing called Boldly Go. And
yeah, I wouldn't say strictly Go, but definitely that's the focus, the priority. Yeah.
Do you think it brings y'all like the sorts of audience you'd like to interact with, or is it the other way around? You take people who are maybe not familiar with all the benefits and all this, maybe Elliot, you say this philosophy of minimalism in software development, and you're converting them. Is it like you picking the audience you want, or is a random audience coming to you and like converting?
That's such a great question. I think so. YouTube is such an interesting place because I think actually YouTube is very representative of software development, but obviously YouTube is algorithmic based, so there has to be a lot of hype that kind of goes into things. So languages that feed into that hype often do very well, and Go doesn't always. That being said, some of my favorite video that I've ever done was actually looking at how to use the standard library of Go for advanced HTTP routing. It was following the 1.22 release once they added in, advanced method-based routing with Go. And I got a lot of videos.
Advanced.
Advanced, yeah. I can't
Advanced
remember
for 1993.
Yeah. But I can't remember if that was actually in the release notes. But yeah, advanced routing in Go. That was kind of the title of the video. A lot of people really, really enjoyed that video because I think it answered a core question that I got from my 122 overview, which was, how can I use the standard library now for routing in Go, which is something I felt was missing for a long time. You had frameworks such as Gorilla, which I absolutely loved Gorilla, Chi, then you had kind of the more complex ones, I feel like Echo, Jin, all these other ones that had a lot of nice boilerplate. And I think because it had gone on for so long where you had to use these frameworks in order to actually do what Go was kind of always, which was a core property of Go, which was HTTP web servers, it kind of, I've really detracted from the original question, so I do apologize, but it kind of that video kind of resonated with a lot of people of like, you can use the standard library now for all of these advanced features, such as subrouting, middleware, all these things that you were relying on a third-party framework. Mm-hmm. That video continues to do really, really well, and it's one of my most popular ones, and it's one that I absolutely love as well. And for me, that kind of hits both audiences. It hits an audience that is learning Go and wants to just take that philosophy of like use the standard library as much as possible. And it also speaks to an audience that already uses Go, but wants to use the standard library more and wants to know how to do some of these more advanced things that come from the minds of the creators of Go and how you should be able to use the standard library as much as possible. To answer the question in a long-winded way, I think the content appeals to kind of both. I try to focus my content on general software engineering, at least like back-end software engineers mostly. But at the same time, I also want to appeal to developers that like to use Go as well.
I think I can really imagine someone watching your videos, not necessarily even on Go, but the HTTP one is a good example in my opinion. And I'll take another one. You have, I think, a video about like setting up terminal, like Tmux or Vim, or like setting up all these, again, advanced for 1993 editors that we're rediscovering are good again. I'm firmly in your camp, by the way, love Tmux. So I can really imagine someone being super frustrated working in like, not to shame any specific editor, just, you know, I don't know, they're stuck with Visual Studio 2012 because they're working on legacy .NET projects, et cetera, et cetera. And then they come home all like frustrated from working on their super outdated, bloated, you know, tons of GUI and toolbars and buttons and features IDE, just coming, watching your video, like setting up Tmux. It's all very clean. It's all very minimalist, and sort of being like, yes, this is what I need, coming back to their company and sort of moving that change. Really imagine someone trying to do HTTP, you know, with a super bloated framework. It's really difficult to move stuff around. Maybe even if the company is big enough, like an internal framework for HTTP, because of course in this company we would like to do it this way. And just watching there's a new Go release with the 22, and you can just do it with the standard library, and just hacking a POC in a day and sort of starting this change. I'm wondering how many people who watched, like you wouldn't be able to know this, but how many people who watched the 122 thing already knew about it because they read it about it somewhere else, or are you their like main source of news? Some people told me that about the podcast. Like I just listen to it and then I don't need to follow the Go blog anymore. And I'm like, no, you do need to read that stuff. John and I are not real journalists.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point as well. And that's something I think a lot of people do rely on YouTube to get their news, especially about software development changes. And as you say, I'm not a journalist either, and I definitely make mistakes. So I always try to encourage people to go to the original source, and I'll try to link them in the video as well. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm more of an entertainer than I am a journalist. And I want to present news that I find interesting, and that I want to entertain people by sharing it in a way that's a story. But I'm definitely not a journalist. I'm always going to get things wrong, and I'm always going to be corrected in the comments, which is one thing I actually love about my community. They're very quick to correct me, but do so in a very tasteful way that they want to have a discourse or a discussion as well, which I think is actually fantastic about. I love that with my community. It's one of my favorite things about live streaming as well, because I get to interact with people directly. But yeah, I think for some people, I am absolutely their kind of news source for some things. I don't do too much news, so when I do, I can be. But sometimes I also help to teach people, as you mentioned with Tmux, I try to focus more on, here's how I use these tools, here's how I use this language. hopefully that teaches people that they can use it in those ways as well.
You recently did the news-ish video. I think your most recent, at the time of this recording, that is, most recent videos about the Elastic open source license change. So that felt totally out of left field, because I was like, oh, he's the terminal and Go and chill guy. And suddenly like, no, business. This is how Elastic is regretting, their license change. It was interesting to see, just covering interesting things and not like limiting yourself to a specific, I guess, formulaic form of a video.
Yeah.
Or I guess,
that video was, that video for me, that was, I think, about a week ago today. And I was reading /programming, believe it or not, and it popped up. And for me, I don't know. A lot of people, I think, felt very betrayed by Redis's license change recently. Yeah. No less than the actual contributors must have felt as well. And so for me, the issue of kind of these companies moving towards closed source models that have been built on the back of open source, that always kind of struck a little bit of a nerve for me. I'm a huge proponent of open source software. I will always prefer to use an open source product compared to the closed source one, even if it's not as good. So when you see companies that you've kind of really appreciated for having that open source model move away for whatever reason, some of them may be legitimate, some of them may be not so legitimate, it kind of stings a little bit. And it's been a bit of a worrying trend over the last few years. And I think Elastic, they weren't the first. I think MongoDB were one of the first companies to do it. Elastic did do it recently, shortly after MongoDB, and then most recently Redis did that. And I think that one really stung quite a lot for a lot of people.
Well, and don't forget HashiCorp.
HashiCorp was a big one as well. So I think when the news kind of changed that Elastic was going back to open source, I think that was some really great news. Obviously, with the YouTube algorithm, positivity doesn't always go very well. So you kind of have to put in a bit of a twist into the story as well. But ultimately, from that video, from my perspective, I thought it was really, really great news. I don't want to see anything bad come to Elastic. I'm just very, very happy that they've decided to go back to open source again.
You said positivity doesn't track well with YouTube, as in like if your video would have been titled Elastic doing the last mistake, you won't believe how much open source contributors got, effed by this license shit, blah, blah, blah. It would like make more numbers. More people would watch it, you think?
It's such an interesting paradigm of social media, but controversy always does better than positivity. And I try to always focus my content on positivity rather than controversy, which is a bit of a tough line to kind of walk. I've definitely done some more controversial videos in the past, and they always do really well, but they don't make me feel very good. So I try to keep it more towards like, here's what you can learn. Here's something I've learned recently. Anything that kind of lifts up the community, or at least like makes me feel like I'm lifting up the community, is something I would always prefer to do when it comes to videos. But they're not always the most popular videos out there.
That is unfortunate, but makes sense.
One of my most popular videos is 10 Things I Hate About Go. I think it really emphasizes the point you're making.
Yeah. I think there must be I'm always trying to find a way to improve, and I feel like there must be a way to have kind of the feeling the feeling that there's controversy, but ultimately it's a positive message at the end of it.
Well, so last November I did a no effort November. I made like 15 videos in a month. Each that I just threw together in an afternoon. And the ones that did the best were the ones where things like "you're doing it wrong" or something like this in the title. And of course, then the positive message, if you will, is here's the right way to do it. So that maybe that's an angle you could try is the right way is this, the wrong way is the thing you're doing. Talk about the wrong thing in the title.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Maybe
so,
negativity in November.
One of the questions that to get back to one of the questions that Shai asked, I wanted to bring up the conversation I had a couple weeks ago with Mariah. I don't remember if we put this on the show or not, but she does Twitch streaming about Go. And we did record part of our conversation. It was just a random conversation that we put on the show. And I can't remember if this is after or before we hit stop. But I asked her about what kinds of things she does on her Twitch. Is it just coding? And she says that some of the most popular stuff she does, I'm pretty sure this part made it into the show, was beginner focused stuff, because I suppose because there's a lot of beginners out there, or maybe it's not so much because there's a lot of beginners, but because the beginners are the ones who are looking for this sort of content. But I think that touches on the question of like, are you trying to attract a particular audience, or are you the audience just sort of come naturally. And I think Mariah and I agreed that we both do it because we like doing it,
Mhm.
and the audience comes if they come. And she streams. She said she streams to typically 6 to 8 people at a time. Pretty small, as Twitch streamers go. I guess it's fairly small, and that's better than my streaming efforts. Usually, I usually have 2 or 3. But at least in our cases, we agreed that it's code I would be writing anyway. Why not turn on the camera and let somebody benefit potentially? And maybe they watch the replay. Maybe they aren't there for the live thing, but they're there for the replay. So it's not that either of us are looking for the audience per se. It's that we're doing what we do, and if somebody wants to watch, that's great, and if they can benefit from it, that's great. I'm curious how much of that you do, or are you doing the quote YouTube thing, and you're thinking of what does the audience want, what title am I going to do, what thumbnail, all that sort of stuff that all the creators tell you to do. Where do you fall, or does it depend?
Yeah, that's such a good question. It's such a balancing act of kind of, I want to just create content that I want to create, and at the end of the day, I'll put it out. If people like it, that's great. If people don't like it, doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. For me, I'm more on the other side of it. So I try to think mostly about the audience, what the audience wants to see, and I will tailor my content to that. It's obviously what I want to create as well. I don't want to kind of be a slave to the algorithm or a slave to the audience of what I want to create. I still have an idea of what it is I would like to create videos on, but I always think about it of what value am I going to give to the person watching this. So if somebody, if thousands of people want to commit time to sitting and watching my video, I feel like I have to reward their choice to click on my thumbnail, to read my title and be engaged. And I need to deliver on that promise of what I'm presenting to the user. So a lot of that thought does go into kind of the audience experience. Like I want people to really enjoy and understand the video all the way through. Sometimes I do well on that, and sometimes I absolutely miss, but that's part of the whole learning experience.
Right.
But yeah, the audience value is always number one in my opinion.
Okay.
So you would consider your channel sort of more educational than just like entertainment, period?
I would say so. I think it's definitely in between maybe the two. It's not purely educational in the fact that I will go deep into a topic and kind of explain it through and through. I still kind of keep it high-paced and reasonably engaging so that people can sit and get a bit of a information dump, but not too much of like, we're really going to go into the weeds of what we're talking about today. It's more of it's kind of fast-paced, educational, but at the same time, entertainment is still very paramount, and I will take something out if I feel like I'm explaining it too long or I'm not getting to the point quick enough. I also have a really bad habit of I record the entire video and then I'll go back through it and record it again, but saying things differently and in a more concise and elegant manner. So I do like multiple passes on my video, which takes a lot of time, but I really find that comes out to be where I'm saying what I want to say in the shortest amount of words or the fewest amount of words.
Many people told me that they listen to our show. There are probably some people who are listening right now in double time. So I'm always like half considering how fast should I talk, how whatever. Maybe we should do that as well. We should just record the show one take super fast on double time, then listen to it on double time and re-record it in real time. I can't imagine doing the show twice though.
That's like a lot of work.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Well, if we do both of them double time, it's the same amount of work.
Oh, that's true.
There we go. I wanted to ask a couple questions about your channel. Just looking at the details that YouTube shares, it looks like you started the channel in 2019. Is that about right?
So I kind of started it in 2019. I think I started the YouTube channel with the intention of doing videos in 2019, and then I didn't really muster the courage until 2023.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I did the same. So 2023, you started more seriously, and now you're up to 133,000 subscribers. I probably started early 2023, late 2022, and I'm up to almost 5,000 subscribers. Although this year I've really been taking a break, preparing for this move. What have you done to promote your channel, or is it just the algorithm feeding you subscribers?
It is just the algorithm. Just the algorithm. So really kind of spent a long time trying to figure out what the algorithm wants. And this has always been something I thought as a negative of myself, but I'm a huge content consumer. I love movies. I love TV shows. Loved YouTube as well. I considered at one point getting a tattoo saying "do more, watch less," just to remind myself to not watch content as much as I do. But I've always enjoyed that as a medium of like entertainment and education.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that had driven a lot of kind of what I wanted to do, or like how I wanted to kind of approach YouTube. And I spent a lot of time researching kind of what do people want to click? Why do I want to click on a video? Why do I want to watch a video? And I actually never really watched coding content. I still really don't watch coding content. I create it, but I don't watch it. I think the most technical adjacent I ever got to was more like home labs and kind of self-hosting and things like that, which I'm really interested in. But when it came to actual coding, the reason I got inspired to do coding videos was because I was kind of burnt out from work. I'd entered into a more managerial position, and it was less of a technical role. I felt like a lot of my creativity had gone, and being kind of that middle management layer and not an IC anymore is a very culture shock to kind of how you work. So I needed kind of a creative outlet, and I picked up woodworking of all things. I think also when software developers are burnt out, they will always reach for kind of these more physical hobbies. You often hear developers want to go build a log cabin in the woods and live in there, or become a farmer or anything like that. Yeah. For me, it was woodworking. So I picked up woodworking and I started watching YouTube videos, as you do, to kind of learn the hobby and take from it. And it was very project focused. So these fantastic creators doing woodworking would, go through and show how they created a project. And that to me was kind of interesting. And I thought, what if I applied that to writing code? It would get me back into writing code again. I could feel like my creativity or my creative itch was being scratched. So I basically was inspired by woodworkers to go and create coding content.
That's so cool. I think number one, at least most consistent channel I've been watching is also about like sort of like a physical creative person. It's someone called Inheritance Machining. I've been following them for the last like 2.5 years. Someone doing like precision engineering with manual machines like lathes and things like that. I know nothing about, 2.5 years later, I could probably operate a lathe and just lose like 2 fingers and not all of them. But that itch you're talking about of like, I work at my thing, maybe I like it, maybe I'm burned out, but I won't watch people doing it on YouTube or something like that is so interesting, because I do find myself like attracted to watching people doing stuff and listening to news about programming. But I've tried a few times to watch like programming streams or people trying to solve CTFs, or even listen to other coding podcasts, right? There's a ton of good stuff out there. Good chance to shout out Go Time, our sort of like big sister podcast. And when I was trying to get into Rust, so Rust Station, and just like whatever, it's difficult. It's difficult to consume content about the thing you do all day, but taking inspiration from other just subjects and saying like, I liked watching this woodworking video. I now understand the vibe of your videos, because I have a project I want to get to. Here are the steps in the way. It's going to be very calming. And, you got to worry about your fingers. In woodworking, it's from saws. In your videos, it's about not using the most ergonomic keyboard ever, right? But I can see the parallels. Yep. That's really cool. Really, how the sausage gets made kind of thing.
Yeah, I actually, that does bring on a really good point. So, like, a lot of my inspiration for my videos comes from, like, outside of the technical niche. Pretty much exclusively. So with the you mentioned the video where I was building that spinner, and I had kind of those, I don't want to call them cinematic, but they were attempting to be cinematic shots of like top-down shots of the keyboards, things like that. That all came from watching a lot of cinematic vloggers. There's a whole niche on YouTube of these new age vloggers that are doing very cinematic stuff. So beyond what Casey Neistat was doing, which was like the daily vlog, and Casey had a lot of cinematic elements to it, but now creators like Life of RZA, Matthew and Cena, these creators are doing like very, very cinematic shots in their vlogs. And that to me was just so inspiring, and then scratched my creative itch of like, how do I do cinematic shots with code? Because that's a very, very difficult problem to show. it's not very real life when it comes to coding. It's usually on a screen and we're engaging with computers. So that challenge in itself, one, to be inspired and to figure out how to do it. And then two, how to kind of use film and visual metaphors to explain code as well. I think that's something I'm really, really interested in.
I love that. Yeah, that's cool.
There's a guy, I have to look up the channel. He's developing a game called Astortion, and he's sort of one of these. I think there are like 5 or 6 people I follow on YouTube that do game development videos or game development content. There's like GMTK, and there's a guy called Randy, which is sort of unhinged, and this person developing Astortion. It's really interesting to see when you do it. And Jonathan, you mentioned, why not turn on the camera, right? Like if I'm already going to develop it. So the reason is in my opinion, is it's sort of quantum. If you do turn on the camera, right, then people watching you, maybe watching your stream or watching the content responding, might affect what you do. Elliot, you're doing YouTube full time now, right? So you're not doing content about corporate problems or like real problems. You're doing at this point content as your job. I think it affects it. All these dev YouTubers, for example, this guy doing Astortion, their financial interest at this point is to draw out the project and the game development as long as possible, which is 100% opposite from if they didn't have the camera on. So I think there's sort of a weird incentive there. You don't work on like long form projects, so it doesn't exist there. But in all the game development thing, I see people like drawing out the projects and going on side tangents and developing their own shaders, blah, 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 instead of just shipping stuff, which is interesting. The reason I mentioned the Astortion guy, by the way, is because when I saw the cinematic video and all the editing and all the cool stuff, I was reminded of his thing where he wanted to do explanation for code stuff in his videos. So he developed a whole open source JavaScript-based animation library just to explain stuff, and then that became the most popular thing on his channel. So these things sort of feed into each other. So you should really dig more into how to make the videos more cool and more cinematic. You might end up, I don't know, implementing open source Linux auto AI cinematic editor or something like that. I don't know. It could spin into cool stuff.
Yeah, I actually agree. I think that actually touches on something that I think is really important when it comes to software development, in that I'm somebody who's always loved to build side projects, but I've always struggled with what side project to build. Ever since doing content creation, I now have an unlimited amount of side projects I could work on. I now have to kind of prioritize which coding projects I want to work to improve kind of my own content creation. And that to me is something that kind of was always missing when it came to determining what projects I wanted to build. I needed kind of that additional hobby beyond writing code in order to understand what problems I needed to solve. And when it comes to writing just code as a hobby, which is something I had for probably a decade, writing code was all I really cared about. I didn't really have greater exposure to other problems in order for me to have inspiration for side projects. It was kind of, unless the side projects were coding focused, obviously.
Where do you see the channel going in the next, I don't know, 3 to 6 months? You said you're doing full time now. What are your plans? What kind of videos can we look forward to, or do you play it more by ear? Yeah,
that's a great question. I definitely play it by ear. I kind of will respond to trends and kind of what does well, what doesn't do well. The one thing I definitely will be doing, I mean, I'm working now with a video editor, which has freed me up a lot of time. Yeah. So I'm going to hopefully focus more on doing cinematic shots. I'm actually building tooling around working with video editors because I think that's a very challenging thing to do. Get your creative vision down so that a video editor can take your raw content and turn it into your vision. I kind of built a huge system using Notion to kind of make that work, and it's done really well. So I want to kind of productize that and build it into software to make that a little bit easier. That's one thing I'm working on.
I love the shade being thrown on Notion, the fact that it's not software.
Yeah, I mean, Notion's really, really great. It does have a lot of benefits. I prefer Obsidian, but Obsidian can't do everything that Notion can. But it feels very hacky whenever you build a system in Notion. Like it's kind of duct taped and super glued together. And, anytime you need to expand it, that's when writing code and building those things yourself. Like I'd love to, well, one of the things I really want to have is like a Google Drive or an S3 bucket, but with a nice UI that I can actually label footage with sections in like my transcript so that my editor can just go, oh, here's this line, this section in the transcript. I know that this footage relates to it. So, and that's something that's actually a challenge when doing coding content, because most video editors don't know how to code. So trying to explain what's the important part that they have to see is really, really difficult to do. At some point, it becomes more effort than the actual code or the actual editing itself. So you have to try to make it a system that's really, really simple to do so. So that's something I'm building, but it's definitely more of a selfish personal project. What I'm actually kind of trying to build with my time is to work on kind of more Golang courses. So I want to be able to have different courses that I can kind of offer for sale that are mainly going to focus around building different types of applications in Go.
How much time do you spend on this in a given week? Is it 40 hours or are you the drink? Do you have the work from home self-employment schedule? Everybody does, and you're drinking Mai Tais half the week.
Yeah, it's definitely on the top end. Recently, it's not been. Now that I've got a video editor, I have a lot more free time. Yeah. Before, it was basically 12-hour days, 6 days a week, as kind of you do anytime you're getting something started. There's also that self-employed fear of like, if I'm enjoying myself, I'm not earning money, so I need to be doing things that help me earn money. Getting out of that mindset has been really helpful for me, and that did help by hiring somebody. Now I'm trying to keep it down to like a 40-hour week. It's probably more a 48 to 60-hour week still.
Okay.
Slightly better work-life balance. Yeah, I think whenever you go self-employed for something that you're very passionate about, it's going to consume more time than a typical 9-to-5 would.
Absolutely, yeah.
You mentioned your how to code. Someone recently mentioned, this is not a question to you. You can just chill. You're like listening attentively, but this is a question to Filippo, our editor. Filippo, do you know Go at this point? You can maybe edit in a yes or a no. But we've had our editor edit our show for like, how long now? A year and change? Is that possible?
Right, yeah, I think at least a year, probably longer. I'm not sure.
If you're editing like Go news on a weekly basis, you got to know something about it at the very, like, I imagine if you can find, I don't know, a comp sci student who's also into video editing, you might have a more like a win-win arrangement. But then you won't have to build that side project. And
we'll need to interview
what
Filippo
videos
on the
you're
show.
going to do.
That's true. That's true.
We'll
I think that's actually what a lot of content creators in YouTube do. They do tend to find more comp sci interested individuals. But for me, I really wanted somebody more interested in cinematography rather than the computer science. And I thought I can maybe teach them to code, or I mean, I'd love to know if your editors learn at this stage.
I think we need to have Filippo on an interview at some point and ask him about that. It'll be a great chance to ask him the question I'm about to ask you, Elliot, which is the question we ask all of our guests. When you were learning Go, what was the most surprising or challenging thing for you?
I think the most surprising or challenging thing for me when learning Go was, this is going to be a bit of a controversial statement, it was understanding the true power of the implicit conformance of interfaces. So it's one of my favorite features of Go as well, and it's probably one of the most understated features. I've actually, when I talk to people in comments, they actually call it as a negative that you don't explicitly type as conforming to an interface. Mm-hmm. For me, I think it's so powerful because it enables decoupling when used in the way that it's intended. But initially I came from it from other languages where you explicitly mark it as being conforming. So that probably leads on to the larger challenge that I had with Go, which was breaking a lot of habits from other languages. I think it's probably the most common thing that a beginner to Go has to understand, is that the way it's done in Go is not necessarily the way it's done anywhere else. Yeah. And then there's the common one as well, learning all these amazing constructs for dealing with concurrency and learning to not use them.
Yes. Good answer. Well, Elliot, would you tell everybody where they can find you? Of course, we'll have links in the show notes, but you've already mentioned the channel name, but do it one more time. How can they find your channel and any other content you have?
Awesome. Yeah. You can find me on youtube.com at Dreams of Code. That is my handle. It's all one word, lowercase. That will have links to all my videos and any of the other channels that I also run on there, which is only one at this stage. Also, you can go to dreamsofcode.io if you want to sign up to a mailing list to get some information, but I don't really keep on top of that. But yeah, that will have any information of new projects or ventures that I'm working on.
Awesome. And it looks like you're selling merch too.
I am.
Awesome.
Oh, really? What
we have
merch?
Notebooks and stickers and even a coffee mug, of course. We have to have a
Cheat
coffee
sheets. That's cool. That's cool. I like
Very
that.
cool.
Just want to say thanks a lot, Elliot. It's been great. Keep up the Go content. It is really refreshing to see someone doing coding content in my favorite language, in the thing I'm doing, and doing it so like thoughtfully and like you said, worrying about how it looks and how it sounds and how it's built. And it's just very obvious that a lot of care and a lot of expertise is going into your videos. And I just love to see that, man. Keep it up. And thanks for coming on the show and telling the listeners about it.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.